This is part 2 of Lesson 9 corresponding to Chapter 9, Firewall Management and Security. In this part, we will begin by discussing how to prevent fragmentation attacks. We will talk about testing firewall security. We will discuss various tools for monitoring your firewall and basic firewall troubleshooting. So in preventing fragmentation attacks and the effect of denial of service attacks on a firewall, use modern intrusion detection and firewall filtering features, as well as perform segment fragmentation. Segment fragmentation queries the network route to determine the smallest MTU or datagram size. An MTU is a maximum transport unit, the size of the largest packet a network protocol can transmit. Then the sender pre-fragments the data to ensure that no fragmentation needs to occur en route. You need to deploy a dynamic filtering system that performs virtual reassembly of packets, which will piece together both fragmented packets and the original payload. You need to, the most common method of exploiting and or bypassing a firewall is the internal code planting. This is where a hacker can plant code internally or trick a user into running code, or if an employee brings in code of his or her own outbound connections to malicious external entities might be possible. Denial of service is another common threat to firewalls. If the victim of a denial of service attack has a firewall, then the firewall will detect and discard the denial of service attack. Beyond this, a firewall's vulnerability to DOS flooding, pardon the typo there, is the one limitation that you can't fix, improve, or repair by either upgrading the firewall or applying a patch. Tunneling is the creation of a quasi-VPN tunnel, and that's a serious network security risk. There are two types of tunnel attacks, inbound and outbound. Inbound attacks require a malicious server installed inside the perimeter of a firewall that permits inbound communication. Outbound attacks require an external server with an internal client that initiates contact in a firewall that permits outbound communication. This exploit can convert almost any protocol at any layer of the OSI model into an encapsulation or tunneling protocol. Some of the defenses against tunneling: strictly enforce deny by default for both inbound and outbound communications. Clearly define in the acceptable use policy what is not authorized and deemed a risk. Use network and host IDS/IPS monitoring. Deploy whitelist controls to prevent the installation of unapproved software, and limit mobile code such as ActiveX, Java, Flash, Silverlight, and JavaScript, which is not always easy to do, but you need to try and limit it as much as possible. In testing your firewall security, you can employ simulated firewall tests, virtual firewall tests, and laboratory tests. Initially, before we discuss these, every update, change, or alteration to any aspect of your firewall or the network segments connecting to a firewall should trigger another round of firewall testing. A simulated firewall test uses an attack simulator to transmit packets to the firewall. You can locate the attack simulator inside or outside the firewall to simulate an internal attack or an external attack. Create a virtualized network environment using a virtualization tool such as VMware that performs virtual firewall tests. A virtual intranet is created, and a virtual firewall bastion host goes up, and virtual external systems become active. Then the administrator works through a variety of scenarios of attack, from internal attackers and external ones. You can test it using techniques that might otherwise damage or interrupt the production network. Laboratory tests run on production subnets where you've configured a duplicate of the production environment, mirroring each system, including the firewall. Any of these testing configurations can benefit from the use of what we call fuzzing tools. Fuzzing tools use a brute force technique to craft packets and other forms of input directed toward the target. They stress the system to determine whether it will react improperly, fail, or reveal unknown vulnerabilities. They can discover coding errors, buffer overflows, race conditions, remote exploit flaws, injection weaknesses, and so on. But they can take a significant amount of time to discover anything that's interesting to you. Tools for monitoring firewalls. Firewalls are incomplete security on their own. Tools and software will be dictated by budget and threat evaluation. Don't overbuy or underbuy. The nature of exploits and attack methodologies can change quickly, which limits the useful lifespan of any recommendation. Okay, some tools for monitoring your firewall include Nmap, also known as ZenMap, NetStat, TCP-View, Fport, and Snort. Nmap is a network mapper, port scanner, and operating system fingerprinting tool. It can check the state of ports, identify targets, and probe services. NetStat is a simple command line tool to list the current open listing and connection sockets on a system. TCP-View is a GUI tool to list the current open listing and connection sockets on a system, as well as the service program related to each socket. Fport is a command line tool to list the current open listing and connection sockets on a system, as well as the service program related to each socket. And Snort is an open source rule-based intrusion detection system that can detect firewall breaches. Some more tools. Nessus, OpenVAS, Wireshark, which you used in the first course, Cybersecurity 1, Netcat, Backtrack, and Syslog. Nessus is an open source vulnerability assessment engine that can scan for known vulnerabilities. Wireshark is a free packet capture protocol analyzer and sniffer that can analyze packets and frames as they enter or leave a firewall. Netcat is a hacker tool that creates network communication links using UDP or TCP ports that support the transmission of standard input and output. Commonly creates covert channels to control a target system remotely or bypass a firewall. It can test a firewall's ability to detect and block covert channels. CryptCat offers similar capabilities using encryption. Backtrack, a Linux distribution that includes hundreds of security and hacking tools, including Nessus and Metasploit. It can perform attacks against or through a firewall for testing purposes. And Syslog is a centralized logging service that hosts a duplicate copy of log files. It provides real-time backup of every log on every participating host. Documentation. Good documentation and planning makes troubleshooting firewalls simpler. You need useful troubleshooting information that you need to have before you perform your troubleshooting. Includes the complete hardware and software inventory relative to firewalls, written and electronic copies of configuration settings, firewall policy, change documentation, previous troubleshooting logs, activity error and alert logs, maintenance logs, and any information about the current problem. When it comes to your documentation, you want to make sure you have that before you ever get to the point of having to perform any troubleshooting. You should maintain and update your documentation as you for the length of time that you possess the firewall, starting from when you first install it to when you retire it. In this way, if you have that documentation, you don't have to go looking for it, and you will have previous information about the behavior of the firewall, which is very important to perform any kind of troubleshooting analysis, because you know what the firewall has done in the past and what it's been attacked by in the past. Basic firewall troubleshooting. Trouble involving network security demands a prompt resolution. You need to be patient. Keeping your cool and taking your time will pay off by allowing you to find a solution quickly without making mistakes, overlooking essential details, or intensifying the problem further. You need to know your firewall thoroughly. The more you already know about the firewall, hardware and software, the more you will know how it functions and can immediately use that knowledge to seeking out a solution. Focus. You need to seek to find a solution to the current most critical problem. Don't waste time fixing, repairing, upgrading, resetting, or configuring any other problem or aspect of the firewall system until you've resolved the primary problem. You can become distracted by minor details that only take a second to address, only take a second being in quotes. Make a list of these smaller issues and come back to them later. Isolate the problem. Whenever possible, isolate elements or components of the firewall system that are functioning correctly to narrow the range of suspects of potential problem sources. Simplify. Disable or disconnect software and hardware that's non-essential to the function of the firewall. This will reduce the complexity of the situation and may assist in discovering the cause. Try the quick and easy fixes first. Try the fast and easy stuff before the hard and complicated options. You might be lucky, but if not, undoing easily attempted failed solutions will be simpler than the more complex options. You need to avoid destructive or non-reversible solutions. Attempts to use an irreversible fix is a poor idea early in the troubleshooting process. Only after reversible and or safe solutions have failed should you attempt more drastic measures. Try the free options before the costly ones. Always try to perform repairs and fixes in-house using tools and resources you already own or can obtain for free. Hold off on purchasing new resources or hiring technical support until you've exhausted other options. Let the problem guide and direct you. The more you understand how your firewall operates and what the problem is, the more the problem directs you toward the affected area or the source of the issue. Make fixes one at a time. Only try one fix or repair option at a time. Attempting multiple fixes at once is more complex and might mask the successful resolution. Test after each attempt. After each fix is made, test the repair to see if it was successful. Reverse or undo solution failures. If a fix does not resolve the issue, undo it to return to the previous state. Leaving failed fixes in place may cause other problems or may intensify the main problem. Review change documentation. Could a recent change be responsible for the unwanted activity? If so, try to undo the change to see if the problem stops. Review previous troubleshooting logs. Consider whether the current problem is the same as or similar to recent problems already in the log. Try repeating successful solutions. Update the troubleshooting log. With every action attempted, whether successful or not, record it into the troubleshooting log and use it as a journal. Think of something, then write it down and try the solution. Write it down, then test for effectiveness. Write it down, then repeat the failure fix. Write it down, then repeat until resolved. Write down the successful solution and make note of any other thoughts, ideas, or observations. Repeat the failure. Sometimes causing the failure to repeat can assist in identifying the cause. However, only do so when the repetition will not cause further harm or loss. Perform post-mortem review. The most valuable result of a problem, especially a resolved problem, is your ability to learn something from the event. Always review the entire troubleshooting response process. Look for ways to improve the response for future problems. In summary, we discussed the best practices for management of enterprise and personal firewalls. We discussed troubleshooting firewalls, firewall management, monitoring and testing tools, concerns of VPN tunneling through or across a firewall, and planning and selection of the proper type of firewall for the best value to the organization.